Sup, you beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. We have a lot to talk about today, but first, a quick announcement. I'm currently publicly workshopping a new morning show live stream, which is something that I'd like to eventually bring over to YouTube, but as I'm developing it, I'm doing it exclusively over at twitch.tv/DeFranco Live. I did the first one this morning. I'll be doing one every day this week at 10 a.m. Eastern to noon. I'd love if you were a part of it, so now or after the video's done, I got a link in the description. You can click over there, follow over there. But with all that said, we have a lot of big news to cover today, starting with this absolutely crazy news, right? Because we got to talk about how a FEMA worker got fired for telling hurricane responders to avoid homes with pro-Trump signs. Also, to be clear, I'm not saying the firing is crazy. I'm talking about that happened. Right? And so this whole thing starts with the Daily Wire, which reported that FEMA workers were canvassing for residents who would qualify for federal aid after Hurricane Milton, specifically in the Lake Placid, Florida area. We're talking about a notably red county that backed Trump by 70% in the election. And reportedly, the FEMA supervisor, Marnie Washington, told workers both verbally and through a group chat to avoid houses advertising for Trump. Right? So if there was a Trump sign or a Trump flag, they were supposed to skip it. But they're reportedly saying in the group chat that it would be, quote, best practice, but then not offering any explanation as to why. With then the Daily Wire citing government employees saying that there were at least 20 houses skipped because of this, meaning that they weren't given an opportunity to qualify for assistance. And when they reached out to Washington's supervisor, they were reportedly told that the situation was being handled and proper action was being taken. With then a FEMA spokesperson saying in a statement after that publication, "We are horrified that this took place and therefore have taken extreme actions to correct this situation and have ensured that the matter was addressed at all levels. Helping people is what we do best, and our workforce across the agency will continue to serve survivors for as long as it takes." With then, over the weekend, FEMA announcing that Washington had been fired and that the situation's been referred to the Office of Special Counsel for an investigation. With then FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell calling Washington's actions reprehensible and adding, "I will continue to do everything I can to make sure this never happens again." And with just how fucking insane it is that someone in this kind of position would do this, understandably, this has become a very big deal. With seeing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis saying on X that the Division of Emergency Management has launched an investigation into, quote, the federal government's targeted discrimination of Floridians who support Donald Trump. Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee also speaking out saying that he will be working with the state's attorney general to determine whether the same thing happened in Tennessee, and adding FEMA exists to serve all Americans, and these actions have eroded the people's trust by failing to deliver desperately needed relief to all survivors. And again, that was just a small taste of the reactions, but the whole situation is insane. And I understand that we live in a time where everything's so polarized, everyone is so divided. But shit like this, what Marnie Washington did, should be condemned by everybody. It is not okay generally, and it sure as fuck isn't the way forward. And I'm glad, at the very least, this person was fired. We'll see what ends up happening from here following the investigation. But, with that, that's the story, some of my personal opinion, and I'll pass the question off to you, whether you agree or you disagree with me. Let me know what you're thinking in those comments down below. And we're gonna be talking about a lot today, so that extends to this story and everything else we're gonna cover. But then, in random what the fuck news, Mattel may have accidentally traumatized a bunch of kids. And that, because if you didn't know, the Wicked movie's coming out this month, and it stars Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. It's highly anticipated. It's supposed to be one of the big box office events of the year, and so there's a ton of merch that's getting released alongside it. And that includes some Barbie dolls of the main characters. Well, you see, what had happened was the boxes for the dolls, presumably for children, they have promotional materials for the film, and on the back, it directs people to go to wicked.com. It sounds like something that would be on a box for a toy for the movie Wicked. But the thing is, the film's website is actually wickedmovie.com, and wicked.com, it's a porn site, which is why this morning, Mattel issued a big ol' apology, saying Mattel was made aware of a misprint on the packaging of the Mattel Wicked collection dolls primarily sold in the US. We deeply regret this unfortunate error and are taking immediate action to remedy this. Parents are advised that the misprinted incorrect website is not appropriate for children. Consumers who already have the product are advised to discard the product packaging or obscure the link and may contact Mattel customer service for further information. And with that, as of yesterday afternoon, the dolls were no longer available for sale at Target, and the line is in the process of being pulled from Walmart, Macy's, Kohl's, Best Buy, DSW, and Amazon. But in general, I kind of see this story as a good news, bad news situation, depending on who you are. Right, on the bad news side, bad news for Mattel. They're gonna lose money on that line of products. Not a great PR look. Also probably bad news for any parent who all of a sudden has a kid that's looking at porn accidentally because they wanted to do something with their Barbies. But, God, I'm so capitalism brand. Great news for collectors. Because if you snagged one of these before they got pulled, boom, you got a collector's item. But then also, actually, maybe there is a third category I'm gonna put this in. Maybe good news, maybe bad news. Well, obviously not the greatest situation for Mattel for the actual movie. Since the controversy is not about the movie itself, it's kind of maybe a positive for them. So much free promo. I mean, I forgot the movie was even coming out next week and that I'm 100% watching it as soon as I can. I saw the musical earlier this year or last year, absolutely loved it. But yeah, Time will tell. But then we need to unpack this wild violence we've been seeing in the Netherlands. Because last week, an Israeli soccer team went to Amsterdam to play a Dutch team. And afterwards, fans of the Israeli team were targeted in shocking attacks widely condemned as being anti-Semitic, with some being hospitalized, dozens being arrested, and days later, even more being detained for participating in pro-Palestine protests that were banned in response to the initial violence. But then also, you had a lot of people criticizing the media coverage of the events, with people arguing that mainstream outlets failed to adequately report on the provocative and even violent behavior of the Israeli team fans. And in fact, some media reportedly even revised their coverage to remove references to anti-Arab behavior after being criticized for it. Which is why, with all that, let's talk about exactly what we know. Whereas one thing that is very clear is that there was conflict almost the moment Israeli fans touched down in Amsterdam last week. On Wednesday, for example, police say some fans pulled a Palestinian flag from a building and burned it in a city square. Other flags were also reportedly targeted, with fans also chanting things like "death to the Arabs." Additionally, a Muslim taxi driver's car was attacked with him still inside, with dashcam video verified by the Times showing a man hitting the car with a long object. And then after that attack, police said that a call went out for taxi drivers to mobilize, and then cars began to gather outside Amsterdam's Holland Casino, where inside, hundreds of the Israeli team fans waited for the local police to bring them back to their hotels. Then the next day, the day of the match, the mayor ordered a planned protest to be moved away from the stadium for safety reasons. City officials also deployed an extra 800 police officers to the streets, and with that, ahead of the game, large crowds of supporters of the Israeli team could be seen on video chanting anti-Arab slogans as they headed to the stadium, escorted by police. Like, for example, in one video, they're saying, "Let the IDF win and fuck the Arabs," with that clip also showing police pushing several pro-Palestinian protesters away from an Israeli team fan. And then, after the match ended, the exact sequence of events remains somewhat unclear. But without a doubt, many of the Israeli team's fans, they came under attack. With, for example, at least 12 videos verified by the New York Times showing groups of men questioning, chasing, or beating people who were apparently targeted as fans of the Israeli team. And this notably as other evidence also suggested that the attackers specifically targeted both Israelis and Jewish people, with some victims reporting being stopped and asked if they were Israeli or Jewish, and other videos showing people being asked to show their passports. And this also is on the flip side, a group of men, including several wearing the colors of the Israeli team, also chased and beat a man, according to other videos verified by the Times. And again, all of this is just some of the reporting. But then ultimately by Friday morning, 5 people being hospitalized and dozens more being injured, some with broken legs. Then by Saturday, we learned that 62 people have been arrested, with 4 people still being held, with the authorities saying that they expect more arrests as investigations continue. And also on Saturday, you had officials temporarily banning public protests and empowered police to search people on the street, which then brings us to Sunday, because despite that, we saw hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators gathering in a main square, with police then quickly breaking it up and dozens being detained. And now you have a lot of people kind of just wondering what's next. And well, there, the Israeli national soccer team, they're going to be playing in Paris on the 14th, with the police chief there already pledging that 4,000 officers will be deployed to the stadium and across the city. They're, of course, concerned that we could see more violence. But then, finally, not forgetting that a lot of this goes back to what's happening in Israel, Gaza, and elsewhere in the region. I mean, just this weekend, more than 80 people have reportedly been killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon, northern Gaza, and Syria. And unfortunately, as usual, this number includes children and other non-combatants, with actually a new UN report finding that nearly 70% of the more than 40,000 reported killed in Gaza since October 7th, 2023, they're women and children. But then thousands of acres in the Northeast are currently on fire, and the fire services are struggling to keep up as New Jersey is facing a wildfire surge of more than 1,000% compared to last year. And all this has been playing out over the past few weeks. I mean, we're talking countless homes threatened and evacuated, road closures, air quality warnings, at least 1 death. And again, the worst is happening in New Jersey, where the Forest Fire Service has responded to 537 wildfires since just early October. And this also as other states in the area like New York and Connecticut have also been battling wildfires. So you have fire services working around the clock on containment. And in fact, there, as of last night, firefighters reportedly have only contained about 10% of the latest wildfire, which has burned 3,000 acres across New Jersey and New York. And with that, you had Bill Donnelly, chief of the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, saying in a press conference yesterday, "We've been running our folks ragged." And ragged might be putting it lightly, just in general, but also because there was this one 18-year-old New York State Parks employee who died after helping battle a fire in Sterling Forest. Now, with that said, as far as what is driving this surge in fires, you have officials saying it's thanks to an unusually warm, windy, and dry season that the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic regions have had this year. In fact, the majority of New Jersey is in a severe drought or worse, and New York City has just gotten through its driest month in history. It's also under its first drought watch in more than 20 years. And so because everything is so dry, you have officials warning that any single spark, it could have disastrous consequences. Which is why we've seen Sean Judy, the assistant forest fire warden for the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, pleading with people to not toss out their cigarettes or any other smoking or burning material onto the ground. Though, that message has seemingly not gotten through to some people. Like in central New Jersey, for example, where a man was just arrested for using an illegal type of incendiary ammunition at a firing range, which set off a fire that eventually covered over 350 acres. And all this is while, yes, there was some rain last night, it wasn't enough to solve the problem. With the same meteorologist saying there just wasn't enough to truly soak the ground or change the drought conditions. But you did have one saying, given that we haven't had rain at all, any little bit will help. And while obviously we're talking about this because it's happening now, the big problem is this is not gonna be limited to this year. With a recent study finding that the frequency and intensity of extreme wildfires has more than doubled in the last 20 years thanks to a hotter, drier climate. Right? What was extreme weather has become the new normal. And while the human cost of what we're gonna see over the next years and decades, it's scary to think about. It's also somewhat connected, and an important thing to note, that this is gonna have an economic impact. With, for example, a recent report from Oxera finding that extreme weather has cost the global economy more than $2 trillion over the past decade, with the US there actually being hit the worst, right? Sitting at more than $934 billion in economic losses, right? Which is a wild number. The next closest is China with upwards of $260 billion. And with all this, there was a statement released alongside that report saying, the data from the past decade shows definitively that climate change is not a future problem. Major productivity losses from extreme weather events are being felt in the here and now by the real economy. But then, taking a quick break from the news, I gotta ask, have you signed up for Prize Picks yet? Because it's making fantasy football for me more exciting this year, and it can for you too. You can run your game all season with today's sponsor, Prize Picks. Right, Prize Picks is a fantasy sports app with over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, and they've made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you pay $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus, it's guaranteed. Also, Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards next week? Turn your sports opinions into real money on Prize Picks. It's easy, just pick, submit, done in less than 60 seconds. And so for me personally, this week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Jamar Chase for more than 79.5 receiving yards, Patrick Mahomes for more than 1.5 passing touchdowns, and Travis Kelce for more than 59.5 receiving yards. So yeah, click the link in the description, download the app today, and use code DeFranco to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup when using code DeFranco. But then, with Donald Trump set to take power on January 20th, he is starting to make key appointments for his administration. And so we should talk about what we're seeing so far because it gives you an idea of what kind of administration it's going to be. Starting with the announcement that made front page news this morning that Trump has officially tapped Representative Elise Stefanik as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, with Stefanik's office confirming she has accepted the post. And none of this is really a surprise because while she was initially elected back in 2015 as a moderate in a then competitive district in upstate New York, Stefanik has turned into one of Trump's fiercest defenders and strongest allies in the House. When she was a loud opponent of Trump's impeachment in 2019, she also helped bolster his 2020 election claims. And while you have the New York Times noting that Stefanik has minimal experience in foreign policy and national security as far as why she was selected for this foreign policy position, it appears that it may stem from the fact that she's recently made herself known as a very outspoken supporter of Israel. I mean, we've covered her on the show. She's attracted widespread national attention for her questioning of university presidents about anti-Semitism on their campuses. And this is more recently, she's been repeatedly calling for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East to be defunded, with her alleging there that has been infiltrated by Hamas. But then also part of the reason her appointment was so significant is that she's the first Trump ally from the House that's getting poached for a position in the administration. And while it's currently unclear how many more are going to get that opportunity, right, it matters. Because anytime Trump wants to raid the House or people he wants to install in his cabinet, that's going to create vacancies that might be problematic for Republicans in the lower chamber. Because while Republicans are on track to keep their majority in the House, they're expected to do so with just a razor-thin majority. Something similar to what they have now. And that tiny majority, it has made it exceptionally difficult for leadership to control the divided party. Though I say that as there is a question in the air of how divided will they be when you have Donald Trump in the presidency providing pressure. But still, worth mentioning there, because any vacancies that narrow the majority anymore, it could present serious challenges. Though I also want to note there, it depends on what that specific district is, right? Like with Stefanik specifically, her seat's considered to be fairly safe for Republicans. And what we'll see is that once she vacates, the governor of New York will have just 10 days to proclaim a special election, which is then required to take place between 70 and 80 days after the proclamation. And again, I mention the situation because you even have some Trump loyalists raising concerns, with the likes of Elon Musk, for example, tweeting, "Elise is awesome, but it might be too dicey to lose her from the House, at least for now." But that said, beyond Stefanik, we've also seen other Trump appointments. Because yesterday, Donald Trump announced that he had named Tom Homan to be his border czar. And Homan notably has decades of experience. He previously served as the acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement from January of 2017 to June of 2018. And in that capacity, he very notably helped design Trump's short-lived family separation policy that removed more than 5,500 immigrant children from their parents at the US-Mexico border in 2018. Also a big thing is that since leaving the administration, Homan also joined the Heritage Foundation as a visiting fellow and contributed to Project 2025. time. So as a result, his appointment has raised questions about Trump's attempts to distance himself from that effort. What I will say with anyone that says stuff like that from here to the next 4 years is none of it kind of matters. Right, while some have referred to Donald Trump's second term as making him a lame duck president, it could also be argued that turns him into the YOLO president. He's not gonna have to worry about a re-election, and generally the political will in his own party against him kind of not there. And there's no reason to think that we're gonna see Republican politicians pushing back, because even if he's not running for president again, the Trumps have control of the Republican Party right now. And that said, as far as what Homan's responsibilities will be in this new role, that's not entirely clear yet. With a post on Truth Social, Trump said that the border czar will take charge of the southern border, the northern border, all maritime and aviation security, as well as all deportation of illegal aliens back to their country of origin. But that said, it's currently unclear exactly how that would work, because as places like NPR have noted, managing immigration requires coordination between several agencies under the Department of Homeland Security. And then also, despite the fact that Donald Trump has made sweeping crackdowns on immigration a key foundation of his campaign, he hasn't really provided any details on how that's actually going to happen or how he plans to deport millions of immigrants. And I mean that regarding like a full game plan, but also, resources and legal challenges. Though I will say one thing that does seem certain is that the administration will be resuming large-scale workplace raids intended to arrest unauthorized workers, which was a policy that was actually paused under the Biden administration, but Homan has already been saying that he'll revive it. And a big key thing is that these are policies that we could see enacted immediately after Trump takes office, especially because the border czar is a position that doesn't require confirmation from the Senate. So Homan will basically assume the role as soon as Trump's sworn in. But then also on the note of administration officials, they don't have to be sworn in. We have the chief of staff announcement. Trump filling that position with Susie Wiles, a veteran Florida strategist who served as the co-chair for his campaign and who has been credited with running the campaign operation that successfully delivered Trump massive electoral wins. Her selection is very notable for a few reasons. First of all, it actually marks the first time in U.S. history that a woman has served as chief of staff. And second, it shows that Donald Trump is filling this top spot with someone that's in his inner circle who knows him and his family well, rather than a more institutional Republican figure. So with that, you have many wondering, because of her insider position, what does it look like transitioning from a campaign to someone that's actually in the administration? But then, with all that, the final administration official I will mention is Stephen Miller. Because while as I'm recording this has not been officially announced, we're seeing reports saying Stephen Miller expected to be named a Trump deputy chief of staff. With the New York Times reporting that Miller, who's an immigration hardliner and advisor to President-elect Donald J. Trump, is taking over policy planning for the transition and is expected to be named deputy chief of staff in the incoming administration. And adding, according to the people briefed on the matter, it remains to be seen how broad Mr. Miller's portfolio will be, but it is expected to be vast and to far exceed what the eventual title will convey. And this, as they went on to report that over the past 2 years, Mr. Miller has also been working on detailed plans for mass deportations. Plans that they reported include restricting legal and illegal immigration in a number of ways, including rounding up undocumented immigrants already in the United States and detaining them in camps before they're expelled from the country. But then, in huge international news, 50,000 Russian and North Korean troops are reportedly getting ready to launch a massive counteroffensive to reclaim territory seized by Ukraine. Right, because Ukraine, they captured hundreds of square miles of Russia's Kursk region in a surprise assault back in early August, with Russia since then slowly chipping away at those gains, taking back roughly half the seized territory. And very notably, all without launching a major ground assault. You see, instead, they've mostly been attacking Ukrainian positions with missile strikes and artillery fire. And one of the reasons they've gone that route is that they've been struggling with manpower, which is something that Putin has tried to deal with by doing everything from releasing and enlisting prisoners, just showering cash on new recruits, and of course, getting a little help from Kim Jong-un. And so with all that, a new US assessment has concluded that Russia has assembled this latest force all without having to pull soldiers out of Ukraine's east, which is really its main battlefield priority. All of which brings us to the question of, well, how much will the help from North Korea be a difference maker? Well, the country has reportedly sent more than 10,000 of its own troops to fight in Kursk, and while they're reportedly in Russian uniforms, they'll probably fight in their own units. And this notably is, according to American officials, the training North Korean troops have been receiving, it suggests that at least some will be directly involved in frontal assaults on Ukraine's dug-in defensive positions. So on one hand, right, we don't know yet how effective they're going to be, considering their lack of combat experience. But at the same time, these North Korean troops, they're reportedly considered the country's best, with them specifically coming from the 11th Corps, which is home to the country's special operations soldiers. Also, a big thing to consider is at the end of the day, this is in part a numbers game. With, for example, Rob Lee, a Russian military specialist at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, telling the New York Times, thousands of additional infantry can make a difference in Kursk. And adding, these soldiers are younger and in better physical shape than many Russian contract soldiers. And this is there may be even more on the way. In fact, Ukrainian intelligence officials have reportedly predicted that North Korea could send as many as 100,000 troops. But then another expert saying it's likely not going to be a one-time shipment of 10,000 soldiers. It is more likely going to be a way to regularly pull in thousands, perhaps up to 15,000 men a month. Now, with all that said, right, if there is one thing that we know, it is definitely that Ukraine has again and again been able to defy expectations. And so it's really not expected that this is going to be a cakewalk for Russia, right? Russian and North Korean forces, they're expected to take heavy losses in any frontal assault. I mean, just right now, for example, American and British analysts put the current number of Russian Russian troop deaths and injuries at an average of more than 1,200 a day. And all of this while Ukraine has been launching attacks deep inside Russia with its domestic-made drones. I mean, just this weekend, they launched their biggest drone attack yet on Moscow, with them reportedly forcing 3 airports to temporarily stop operating and injuring a person. But of course, all of that doesn't change Russia's firepower advantage. I mean, they also launched a record number of drone strikes this weekend. And then, of course, like we talked about last week, underpinning all of this is the fact that Donald Trump just won the presidency. You know, we've seen Ukraine's Zelensky praising Donald Trump, hoping that they can work together. But then also, interestingly, speaking of Trump, right, he reportedly spoke with Putin last week and told him not to escalate on Ukraine. But then, following that report, the Kremlin denied that a call like that ever took place. And so people confused, wondering, are the unnamed sources or the Kremlin lying here? And as of filming, the only thing we've seen from Trump's communication director is, we do not comment on private calls between President Trump and other world leaders. And then on top of all that, you have Biden reportedly expected to push Trump to keep supporting Ukraine when they meet in the Oval Office this week. Though I don't think there's any reason to believe that Biden's going to be randomly very persuasive on this topic with Trump. Especially as, one, it seems like a lot of Donald Trump's base do not want to keep funding Ukraine. And two, you know, all of this is playing out as you have the likes of Donald Trump Jr., who, yes, is a different person, but is arguably on the same page as the president-elect. Things don't look good for Ukraine, with him, for example, reposting this video, seemingly dunking on Zelensky, saying, POV, you're 38 days away from losing your allowance. But for now, we'll have to wait to see what kind of happens in 2 separate blocks, from now to Inauguration Day, and then Inauguration Day and after. But that, my friends, is the end of today's show, though I'll say 2 final things. One, this is your friendly reminder to go to twitch.tv/DeFranco Live and give us a big follow there. I'll be testing morning weekday live streams there at 10 a.m. Eastern. We had a lot of interesting fun this morning. And 2, I just want to say thanks for watching. I love yo faces. For more news you need to know, YouTube thinks you want to watch this. And whether you do or not, no worries, because I'll see you right back here tomorrow.